The night is long and full of terror.
I didn't believe in ghosts for the first 22 years of my life. Always thought there was some reasonable explanation to hauntings, and honestly, I still do. Maybe it's not a ghost. Maybe some kind of weird gravitational energy messing with things. I'm not sure. But anyway, here's my story. My roommate and I, let's call him D, moved out to Colorado with meager savings into a small cabin that was pretty out in the boonies. Our closest neighbours used their cabins as summer homes, so we really didn't have anyone nearby. That's what's cool about living in the mountains though. There's a sense of total isolation you won't get anywhere else. You can turn off everything in your living space and hear nothing except the breeze. No highways, car alarms, nothing. It's very peaceful. But after the first week or two in this cabin, Dee and I both began noticing weird things happening. First was this eerie feeling we would get. I remember Dee once joking with me that he didn't like being in the cabin alone because it gives him creepy vibes. There was one back room in particular where if you stood in it at night, you would feel like you were being watched. Sometimes I'd come home from work and just have this sense of total dread and unease. At the time, I wrote it off to me being paranoid. You know, hallucinating stuff that isn't there because I wasn't used to the total silence and winter isolation. I started noticing stuff getting moved around as well. One morning, my car keys would be missing, and I'd frantically search only to find them in a weird spot, like on top of our refrigerator. I thought D was fucking with me, but he kept insisting it wasn't him. Soon, he started having his stuff get moved too, and would get really pissed off at me, thinking I was trying to prank him back. One night we were sitting around playing video games when something flew across our field of vision. We both looked at each other for a second before realizing we both saw it. For context, the cabin was a typical A-frame, so for the most part, it was one big room, separated into a loft and a downstairs, with the kitchen and our beds at one end, and the living room, TV, wood stove at the other end. Whatever small object flew across the room had gone from the kitchen all the way to the front door. We examined it closer and found out it was a single green bean from our meal that evening. We kinda held it up and looked at it for a second. It had flown all the way across the house, from the stovetop in the back, all the way to our front door. We really didn't have anything to say about it. It was just super weird. The next morning was when I knew our house was haunted. I was watching TV in the front room and taking some bong rips, when suddenly, bam! The roll of paper towels we had sitting on our kitchen counter flies into the bong, knocking it off the table and spilling water everywhere. The roll had been thrown with force. Let me clarify, to the point where I thought D had tried to chuck it at me. I angrily turned around to tell him off, dude, you almost broke the bong, right? D was in the shower the whole time getting ready for work. I felt a chill go down my spine. Some force, spirit, ghost, whatever, had thrown this across the room. D didn't believe me when I told him, and I couldn't blame him. But he soon came to his senses. The next couple of months spent was craziness. Everything from car keys to full decks of cards to box cutters would be thrown around our apartment right in front of our eyes. We'd hear weird growling sounds at night that sounded like they were right in the middle of our house. To be fair, sound carries weird in the mountains, so we probably just heard nearby animals on this one. One time my roommate stormed out of the shower furiously. "Why the fuck," he asked, "would you turn the lights out on me in the shower?" I told him I had no idea what he was talking about. But by far the most frustrating thing was how our stuff kept going missing. I mean, it got ridiculous. One night we left our car keys in a very particular spot just to see if they were moved in the morning. When we woke up, they were gone. But not just that, they had been tucked between the pages of To Kill a Mockingbird on our little bookshelf. It took us hours to find them. Another morning, I couldn't for the life of me find my phone. We tried calling it, and it would ring, sounding loudly throughout the house, but we couldn't pinpoint the exact spot. Finally, we tracked the ringing to the bathroom, but it sounded like it was coming from behind the damn wall. The vanity sorta hung there, so I figured, fuck it. It's probably in the wall, seeing how weird everything is. Maybe there's a hole or something. I took the vanity off its hanging nail, and as soon as I moved it, my phone slid out the back and clattered to the floor. Dee and I looked at each other. His face was totally pale. Like, how the fuck did that even happen? How is that possible? The haunting got to the point of just being silly. We had a friend come visit, and as soon as she opened the door, my car keys were thrown at her face. From across the room. She was like, "Wait, is this cabin haunted?" We kinda joked that, yeah, things get thrown around sometimes. You just have to ignore it. She didn't want to stay there anymore, and that was the point when I asked my landlady if she could provide some history in the cabin we're renting. She got super defensive about it and claimed she had owned it for years and never had anything weird happen. Long story short, we got evicted a couple of months later. Don't want to go into why because there was really no good reason, and it's not the point of this story. But yeah, the uneasiness persisted till we moved out, although the last month of living there, the ghost chilled out on throwing objects at us. I still don't have a concrete explanation for the weird stuff that happened, but after that, I definitely believe in ghosts and other stuff we don't understand.
One year, my mother took us kids to a state park for summer vacation. She wasn't into going camping, so she rented a family cabin at the park. The cabin was picturesque with native stone walls topped by brown plank trim. It featured a small bedroom, a kitchen, bathroom, and had 2 couches in the living room. One of the couches was a hide-a-bed, the other was not. A wall plaque informed us that the park cabins had been built by the WPA in the 1930s. We had arrived in late afternoon and began unloading the car for our 3-day stay. I was to hang our clothes in the tiny closet, and as soon as I opened the closet door, I got a bad case of creepy chills. Though the west-facing cabin door was open and sunshine was streaming into the room, not one ray of light penetrated into the closet. It was like the light just stopped when it struck the open closet door. The wood trim along the opening gleamed in the mellow light, but the interior was pitch black. I couldn't find the rod to hang the clothes on. I didn't want to enter the closet to feel for the rod, and there didn't seem to be a closet light. Mom brought the flashlight. The batteries must be low, but we could dimly see the clothes rack. My sister, 13, and me, 11, would sleep on the pull-out couch. Little brother, at 18 months, would get the couch. Mom would sleep in the little bedroom. Unpacking finished, we hurried outside to enjoy the mountain scenery while it was still light. That night, Mom left the bathroom light on with the door nearly closed. This made a nice, dim night light in a strange place, except for the closet next to the bathroom. We had all been asleep for a while when I woke up without knowing why. Something wasn't right. I hadn't been aware of hearing anything, but something wasn't right. I studied the room carefully. Nothing. I panned across the room again, and that's when I saw a very tall man leaning forward over my little brother on the opposite couch. The man was wearing a tan trench coat, like in the old Humphrey Bogart movies. and a 1940s era brown hat. His back was to me, and he appeared to be studying the sleeping child. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. Little brother's eyes opened. He looked up at the man and began screaming bloody murder. The man just faded out. He didn't leave, but he was gone. Now Mom's up. All the lights are on. Brother's still screaming and won't settle down. Sister sits up, rubbing her eyes groggily. What's going on? Meanwhile, I'm yelling hysterically, There is a man! There is a man in here! Mom checks the exit door next to Brother's couch. It's locked. She grabs a skillet from the kitchen and checks the bathroom. The closet. Goes back for the flashlight because it's dark in the closet. Nothing. Sister gets up and grabs little brother. He begins to climb down, but he's clutching her neck so hard it hurts. A thorough rehashing of events didn't lead to any conclusions. Sister insisted that I'd had a nightmare. I countered, what about brother? Did he have one too? Mom didn't have much to say, just mostly looked thoughtful. She had never allowed us to watch ghost or monster movies for fear that it would give us nightmares. Finally, she said we should all go back to bed and talk about it in the morning. She tried to put brother back down on the couch, but he kicked and cried so much, she wound up taking him to bed with her. She left the kitchen light on this time, and we finally got back to sleep. Next morning at breakfast, Mom explained a little about ghosts and how this might be one. She said ghosts were lost or confused souls. It couldn't actually hurt us. After our day's activities, we would pray for the ghosts. They should go away. It didn't. After our prayer session, Mom left the bathroom light on with the door open, just in case. I wanted to go home. Brother still couldn't stand the sight of the couch. Sister resented the fuss because her sunburn was bothering her. Brother was to sleep with us in the pullout. I thought I'd never get to sleep, but finally did. Again, suddenly I'm wide awake. I look around and don't see anything at first. There he is, emerging from the closed closet door and walking slowly across the kitchen. Again, I can only see him from behind. In spite of the nightlight, the closet area is still shadowed. He disappears into the little bedroom where Mom is sleeping. I wanted to call out a warning, but was frozen with fear. A minute passes, and then another. A crashing sound from the bedroom. My mother's voice loud and commanding. Out! Get out! Lights on. Rerun of last night. Mom said she woke up to see the man standing at the foot of her bed. As her eyes traveled up from the belt of his trench coat, the figure seemed to solidify. Details became sharper. She looked at his face. There wasn't one. An automotive coil shock absorber emerged from the neck of the trench coat and disappeared into the fedora hat. It raised its arms like a Bela Lugosi monster, or priest giving benediction, and began falling forward onto the bed. Right before it hit the bed, it disappeared. The crashing sound came from Mom knocking her water glass and the beside lamp onto the floor when she went for the light. Mom agreed that we would cut the vacation short and leave as soon as it was daylight, even though she doubted that the park would refund the unused day of cabin rent. Trust her to worry about that. Sister had to fetch our clothes from the closet, as I flatly refused to go near it. She had to use the flashlight. Update. Many years later, I relocated to a town not too far from the park. Lots of locals frequent the park, but of course don't rent cabins there. Haven't found anyone yet who has heard of the ghost in Cabin 7.
About a year ago, I got an Alaskan Malamute puppy. I was so excited to have a dog. I wanted to go hiking with him, camping, travel. It was fall in Iowa, so it can get pretty cold for camping. so I decided to start researching cabin rentals. I had found an amazing cabin in Wisconsin on Airbnb. It was fully loaded, very secluded in the middle of the woods, had a hot tub, internet, pool table, great kitchen. This cabin was so beautiful, and it was pretty cheap to rent. The first time I had visited this cabin, I had a great time. It was just me and my dog. I relaxed, we went hiking, I cooked a great dinner, and I slept pretty well. I only stayed one night, just a quick getaway on my day off from work. After getting home, I told my friend Martha about this great cabin, and she was eager to want to take a trip up there with me. We decided to go up the night before Halloween. We took off, just Martha, my dog, and myself. That night we had a blast. We drank, cooked dinner, chilled in the hot tub, then decided to watch scary movies since it was so close to Halloween. I was pretty drunk, but when I was standing in the kitchen, I could have sworn I saw Martha run down the basement stairs, which were right off from the kitchen where I was standing. Then I looked over to the living room, and Martha was sitting on the couch watching the movie. I was so freaked out. But again, I was drunk, so I kinda blew it off. We both end up passing out late, and nothing too exciting happened. What happens the next morning is what has made me a solid believer in the paranormal. I was always sort of a skeptic when it came to ghosts. I had had some experiences that were weird, but I could somehow justify it as something else, so I always had doubt in the back of my mind. But that morning, we were pretty hungover. We ate a little breakfast, then decided to go sit in the hot tub. So I decided to lock my dog in his crate, and we went outside to get in the tub. It was so magical, because it was literally Halloween, and it was dumping down snow. We sat in the hot tub for maybe 15 minutes. I could have sworn I heard a bang inside the cabin, and my dog was barking at something. We got out and ran inside to the kitchen since it was so cold. Then we literally froze in our footsteps. The entire kitchen was torn apart. All the cabinets were open, the refrigerator door and the top freezer door were open. The bar chairs were all flipped onto their backs. Drawers were open, pans were thrown off shelves. Martha's phone was charging on the counter and it was unplugged on the floor. I have no other explanation other than paranormal. My dog looked terrified, but there is no way he tore the kitchen apart. He was still a puppy, so he wasn't that big, and he was still locked away in his crate. Before we went outside, the kitchen was a little messy from our night before, but nothing like what we had walked into. The kitchen was trashed. I know Martha didn't do it because we both went outside at the same time. There was also no way someone broke into the cabin to do it. We were in the middle of nowhere, and it was snowing, so there would have been footsteps. And the hot tub sat right next to the long driveway leading up to the cabin, so we would have seen someone drive up for sure. I just have no other explanation on why that happened. So now I am a believer, and so is Martha. I'm pretty sure my dog saw some crazy stuff. We left pretty soon after this happened, and believe it or not, I actually stayed at this cabin again, multiple times, and nothing ever happened again. Maybe Halloween stirred up the spirits and they just wanted to be heard, or seen in some way. Maybe I really did see a ghost the night before as well. Who knows what crazy things have happened in this cabin. It's very old.
This is just a short paranormal experience I had last summer that I wanted to share. It was summer in Canada, and I, along with two of my friends, had planned to spend a few days camping. We actually found a small cabin that was available at this small cabin grounds for cheap. It was a large piece of forested land by a lake with a bunch of cabins scattered around, and you could rent them for however long. We booked the place last minute and decided to go there instead of camping. If you've ever been to northern Canada, then you know how barren the place is, with a man-made structure every couple of kilometers with forest all around us. 3 hours later, when we arrived, it was maybe around 4 p.m. We met with our owner, which lived in a distant, larger cabin nearby. After talking and paying for our stay, we went off to our cabin. The cabin was small, with a stream leading up to a larger lake right beside the cabin, and a small fire pit out front. There's a dense forest pretty much all around us. Being that far out, we had little to no service. We took advantage of the daylight and took out some kayaks which came with the cabin and explored our surroundings. As it got dark, we set up a small campfire in front of the cabin in the fire pit and just talked. A massive thunderstorm snuck up on us and it soon started to rain. Since it was raining, we didn't bother to put the fire out since it was already basically going out by itself. We went inside and got ready for bed. The beds were all in the same room, so we just talked for the most part since we couldn't fall asleep, with the thunder in the distance and rain pattering on the windows of the cabin. My two friends decided to go outside to have a cigarette. Since I didn't smoke, I just tagged along for fun. I was behind them, and as they opened the door, they said, "Hey, the fire is still lit." And I thought to myself, how could it still be lit? It was raining and the fire was basically going out by itself. I looked over their shoulders and saw the fire still burning away as if it was just lit and was burning at full strength. Just after that, they kind of froze and whispered, "What's that?" before yelling and running back into the room and slamming the front door shut. I couldn't get a visual on what they saw because I was all the way behind them. It happened way too fast, so I assumed they were joking around, but the expression on their face just showed pure fear. So I took it seriously and we all went into our bedroom and locked the door behind us. They were clearly frightened and completely out of breath. I asked them what they saw, and they explained that they saw a wispy white figure that went behind a pine tree which was about 15 feet from the fireplace. The figure apparently moved very quickly and then popped its head out to the side of the tree before hiding again. They described it as almost like smoke, but moved like it was a person. I peeked out the window to see if it was still there, and I didn't see anything except for that fire still burning. We basically stayed up all night and never seen my friends that afraid, especially with one of them being in the military. He just held his knife next to his chest while laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, not saying a word the whole night. In the morning, we tried finding an explanation for it, and we couldn't come up with anything. We spoke to the owner about it, and he told us he would be on the lookout. I wish I could have seen it for myself, but they swear by what they saw, and it was definitely nothing they ever seen before. We still couldn't find an explanation for what happened that night.
Hello watchers and listeners. If you enjoyed that video, please hit the like button, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. A big thank you to Nerdcore Creep for joining me in this one. A link to his channel is in the description below. A huge thank you to all the Reddit users who allowed me to use their stories. A link to each story will also be in the description below. If you have any stories you would like to share on my channel, please send them to my email. As always, many thanks to everyone who continues to support me. I really do appreciate it. Stay safe.